Hi guys, this is Dr. Aeronautics. Today, this is the major tutorial for ascending the XR-2 Ravenstar into orbit. Yes, if you haven't already been announced to the fact the XR-2 Ravenstar is an SSTO, not just a normal old hypersonic space plane. Okay, so what you want to do is open up the walkthrough. What I'm doing is I'm following along to the walkthrough that's in the flight manual, and even though I'm gonna suggest a few different things than what the manufacturer states, normally you want to go by what the manufacturer states, but I kind of have my own opinion for how I want to fly the ship. You can open up the walkthrough KSC to low Earth orbit, and I'm going to be going through that. That's pages 31 to 35 of the XR Flight Operations Manual. So I'm doing this for the XR-2 Ravenstar. So what you want to do is you need to open up, as long as you haven't changed the install directory in scenarios, you go to XR-2 Ravenstar, and the scenario is titled 1. Takeoff, ready for takeoff to ISS. So make sure that's open. The next thing I'm going to do is, they don't tell you what multifunctional displays to open, but I'm going to say that per normal, flights, I like to have my primary flight display on the left side, and then I have anything additionally on the right side. I find that the map is useful if you're trying to perform an ascent. You can see obviously we have the ISS targeted. We're not going there today. That would kind of be covering some of the areas that I've already done. Okay, so the next thing we're going to check once we have these things is check to make sure that our APU is powered on, which it is, that the air flight control surfaces are set to on. Now what I want to do is come down here and make sure, yes, the external cooling hatch is closed. And we want to set our multifunctional display to 3. I prefer Fahrenheit initially, and then I switch it over to Celsius later. Another good thing to do is just to do like a pre-flight and just check the ship over, make sure that there's nothing wrong with it as we about to ascend. I'm specifically talking about the nose cone, top hatch, and radiator possibly being open. This ship really needs a set of standard operating procedures, and it didn't really have any, so maybe that's one thing that I should do in the future, is create some standard ops procedures for this thing, so it's a little bit better. Okay, so we've checked to make sure everything is closed. We're going to take off by applying full power, and I'm going to move pretty quick because things all together go. So full power, things all together go very quickly. That's what I'm trying to say. 3, 2, 1, now.
100 knots.
Takeoff commit.
V1. Rotate.
Okay, I'm going to rotate up now to 10 degrees up. We're airborne, throttling back to 40% to prevent excess aerodynamic pressure. Next, you're going to put the gear up. And in this case, if we wanted to track the ISS,
gear up and locked,
we would want to turn to 136 degrees heading, which we're going to do because even though we're not going to the ISS, typically you are going to target a specific heading. And I'm going to level the wings here. Okay, so now everything is set. We're going to apply full power, and the manual says to pitch up to 70 degrees, but I find that if you pitch up to 50 degrees, it's a little bit better for when you need to level off. You don't have to use quite as much power to do that. It's also going to tell you to level off at 24 to 28 kilometers, and then if I find if you start leveling off there, you're going to overshoot. Also, in the scenario, your secondary HUD is set to 3 by default, but in the future, if you're ever taking off, I highly suggest number 3. Okay, we are now supersonic. So what we're doing is we're accelerating up to a region where the scramjet engines will be able to take over. As I get higher, I like to zoom this map out so that I'm constantly keeping track of my horizon lines here. Okay, we're at 20 kilometers. And now we want to start looking at our Mach number. We're at Mach 2. 22 kilometers, 23. Okay, so now you need to begin pitching down. You want to bring it down to about 5 to 0 degrees. Yeah, right about there, 90,000 feet is about where we want to be. And once we reach Mach 3, then I'm going to go ahead and engage the scramjets.
Mach 3.
Okay, so we're leveled off now. Come up here to the top and open the scram doors up. And we're at Mach 3.5. I'm going to cut the main engines and hold Alt plus to add the scramjet engines in. And right there, we've just got it. So what you're going to do now is maintain a pitch up attitude, just so that we're level at 100,000 feet. And you're going to hold this until your dynamic pressure comes up to about 35 kilopascal or so. Once the scramjet engines take over, I'm going to switch the surface primary flight display to the orbit display. Also at this time, our temperatures are going to rise very quickly, so I'm going to go to Celsius now. Okay, dynamic pressure's ticking up now. And I'm going to come down here and look at our coolant temperature, which is doing just fine. Okay, scramjet engines are taking over, so I'm going to the orbit. I'm going to select the equatorial frame, the ship projection, and change the radius to altitude here. Okay, dynamic pressure's ticking up very quickly, so as it reaches about where you want it, you want to hold about a 100 meter per second climb so that we can continue to feed the scramjet engines.
Mach 7.
Okay, so the temperatures are starting to come up now, so at this point we're going to begin going a bit higher, and you'll notice the dynamic pressure will start to drop. We want to get it to about 10 kilopascal now, and gradually move that down. If you look down in the lower left, we have a very good flow at 6 kilograms per second, and the thrust-specific fuel consumption is relatively low.
Fuel 90%.
Okay, so we're getting down to about 11, and we're above 43, so keep that vertical speed below 100 meters per second. If you go too low, you'll waste fuel. If you go too high, you can't use your scramjet engines.
Mach 10.
At this point, I'm also going to switch the secondary HUD to Mode 2. Mode 2 is very useful for ascent.
Mach 11.
Okay, we're starting to get high around 9 kilopascal, so what I'm going to do now is slowly work my dynamic pressure down to about 4 kilopascal at about Mach 20.
Mach 12.
You can press the insert and delete keys to adjust your elevator trim, which helps to maintain the plus 100 meters per second that you should maintain on the ascent.
Mach 13. Mach 14. Mach 15.
Alright, watch that dynamic pressure. We're now at about Mach 16, and the dynamic pressure is down to about 6.5. Again, we're looking for
Mach 16.
4 and 20. And about 60 kilometers in altitude. And continue to maintain the 100 meter per second ascent rate. Should keep everything good. Now we're actually getting close to running out of scramjet fuel.
Mach 17.
So at this point, if you wanted to save some fuel for when you re-enter, you can save it. I'm not going to, because you can't really use it once you get out of the atmosphere, and I'm not interested in really saving much.
Warning, scram fuel low.
Yeah, so it's just going to let us know. Okay, we're at 60 kilometers, 4.5 kilopascal, just about where we want to be. Our scramjet fuel is going to deplete.
Warning, scram fuel depleted.
And that's good, because in about 30 seconds we would have been going too fast to use them anyway. Close the scramjet doors. If you do not close them, you will explode.
19.
Activate the main thrust engines again. Throttle up to full power and pitch up to about 10 degrees. We're done with the atmosphere. We want to get out of all resistance. At this point, too, we're becoming the air flight control surfaces are becoming too weak, so I'm going to activate RCS.
Rotation. Mach 21.
So if I tried to open the scramjet doors again, we would explode instantly.
Mach 22. Mach 23. Mach 24.
Alright, once you get to about 75 kilometers and 250 meters per second, you can kind of relax, because you want a relatively circular orbit.
Mach 25.
So just keep with the prograde velocity vector at this point. And if you look at the orbit MFD in the lower left, we're getting very close to reaching orbit.
26.
So I'm just going to keep an eye on that, and per the manual here, it says when we get to 200 kilometers, we're going to shut the engines off. That's going to happen very quickly. 180, 190.
27 plus.
200, that's it. And when you hear the call out Mach 27 plus, that's the last call out that it'll give, because we're in orbit now. So that's it. If you look at the dynamic pressure, we've still got relatively high pressure, so we're just going to sit tight for a couple minutes here. We've had our main engine cut off, but we're not fully in orbit, of course. You know, we would need to circularize, and I'll demonstrate that. Now we're currently chasing down the ISS, so if we wanted to do a super Russian, I don't even know if Russian is the right word, it might be a Soviet-style interception that takes a 45 minutes straight to docking, which I've done before. You could do it. We could probably do that right now because we're directly underneath and behind it, which is what you want for that kind of interception. Alright, what I'm going to do is switch over to secondary HUD 5, which is helpful for orbiting. And after checking on 2, our dynamic pressure is almost 0 psi. At this point, what we're going to do is pop the radiator open. You see our coolant temperature is 48 degrees Celsius, which is okay. So we're going to begin opening that now, and I'm going to try and disable the radio song so that I don't get a copyright infringement again. We should, there we go, status message, radiator open. We're now into deep space, so I'm going to switch over to my Kelvin display as the remaining air disappears. We're not going to be able to have any temperature readouts because there's no air. The coolant temperature now has stabilized. That'll go down once we turn off the APU. And now this is exactly perfect lighting. You can see what the deployed radiator looks like in space. We're going over northeastern South America, I believe. Eastern Venezuela. I think Suriname is down there along with France Guiana. Okay. At this point, you're going to center your elevator trim. That way, when you come back into the atmosphere, you don't get a sudden pitch up or anything. Once that is centered, then you can go ahead and switch the AF control surfaces to off. You won't need them anymore.
Pitch off.
I'm also going to, at this point, switch my primary HUD to orbit, and I like to change its color to green. You can actually press this little button here and that'll change it to green. That lets me know that I'm in space. If it's red, it means that I'm in an Earth atmosphere. And I also like to turn to face the prograde velocity vector. Helps orient me. So go ahead and press the prograde button. There's no ship computer entry display, so this is the only real way to do it aside with a keyboard shortcut.
Information. APU running.
Yes, and I know that I'm still running the APU. What I'm doing is I'm waiting till we reach a stable attitude, and then I'm going to shut down the APU right now. And once you're in a stable attitude, if you don't have a maneuver coming up, go ahead and hit the space bar or touch the prograde autopilot button. And that's it. The XR-2 is now in, still in suborbit, but it's now in space. So we're going to perform a circularization maneuver, and then that's about where we'll end. We might also be able to get a visual on the space station, because we're actually really close to it. You see that just took over about 15.5 minutes. So if you're ever trying to perform the Soviet interception, that's about the time that you need to reach low Earth orbit. Oh, that's annoying. Don't forget to turn your lights on before you ascend. I could have sworn that would be in the manual. Again, you know, that underscores the need for operating procedures. So I'm going to come down here, and our coolant temperature is dropping. We have no external cooling hatch capability right now. And we can also take a look at our reserves here. Oxygen, we have 183 days to go. Scramjet fuel is depleted, and that's exactly what we want. We're in space, we can't really use it. Plenty of RCS, plenty of main fuel. In fact, we could probably go to Mars on what we have now. The APU is down to 80%, which is a healthy value for this phase of the mission. I don't really have a mission plan anyway, so it doesn't really matter. So at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the T key, and T will accelerate us at 10 times the normal rate. Be careful when using time acceleration. If you're using the autopilot, it'll go pretty crazy. And once we get out over the Atlantic Ocean, it should be time to circularize. Okay, so now here on the orbit MFD, my ticker is getting very close to the apoapsis indicator. We're also 23 seconds, so I press the R key to drop out of time warp. And we're about 15 seconds away. I'm going to just tap the main engines here up to about 10% and see how it reacts. We're going to go to full now and just watch that periapsis altitude come up, as it will do so very quickly. And once the two swing around, exactly halfway, right there, that's it. We've now circularized. We're in a 202 by 194 kilometer orbit, and that is it. XR-2 Ravenstar is now in a stable orbit. From here on out, all space maneuvers are pretty much almost exactly the same as the stock Delta glider, except for re-entry and a few other things that we're going to cover in the tutorials. So this is what she looks like when she's in orbit. Very nice looking. And you know, there's about 20 different skins that you can use for this craft. And real quick, we'll tour around to the this is the 3D virtual cockpit here. Unfortunately, the virtual cockpit really doesn't interact, so I can't click any of these buttons. You know, all these displays are generic. They're not actually reading our current statuses at all. And if you hold control, I think left control and down arrow, you can drop down into the seats, and I'm looking at the airlock there. Looking back to the rear hatch, and if I go further back, you can see the cabin hatch. Got our windows here. So I'm going to go drop back to the third row now, so you can see a little bit more of the ship. There's the cabin hatch right there. Do not open that when you're in space. There's no airlock on the other side of that. And I'm actually surprised it opens out instead of opens in, because I can't imagine the tremendous pressure on that hatch to keep it closed. Normally when you have a spacecraft, what you do is you have it sealed by the pressure itself. So what you do is you create a manhole cover that's larger than the actual manhole passage itself. And then when you go into space, it's glued up against the edge by the pressure inside, and instead it's trying to be yanked out by the vacuum of space. Probably not a very good thing, but anyway, that's the way it does. Let's see if we can take a look at the space station. I would really like to see that. So to do that, I'm going to go over to Object Info, Vessel, ISS, and we're going to look for the ISS's transponder. That's the most powerful frequency that it emits. That's 131.30 megahertz. So I'm going to go over to ComNav. Well, we actually have 131.3 dialed in, and we can't even see it on the radio. So let me go ahead and try targeting the ISS to see how distant it is. That probably means it's about over 500 kilometers away. Oh yeah, that's like 10 degrees away. Yeah, we're not going to be able to see it. Anyhow, that's about 30 minutes. I think that pretty much wraps up this tutorial. Like I said, all the maneuvers from here on out work just about exactly the same way as the stock Delta glider. Next time I'm going to give the re-entry tutorial. Re-entry in the XR-2 Ravenstar is harder than the Delta Glider 4 because it doesn't have automatic re-entry autopilot. It only has the manual re-entry autopilot. So you have to really know what you're doing to the craft, because there's no sort of, autopilot detected the temperatures are getting too high and is now pitching down to decrease the angle of attack and decrease the, or rather increase the vertical speed. No, it won't do that. You have to memorize that. One more note about the walkthrough in the notes is it says, or you can just forget finesse and run the main and scram engine simultaneously during ascent and accelerate at 3 to 5 Gs. Don't do that. I'm not going to explain why. Don't do that. This has been Dr. Aeronautics. I'm going to go hop in a Delta Glider 4 and fly around the Uranus system. I will see you guys next time. Bye-bye.